Can we see that?
Okay, excellent. I can see it. I'm assuming the other judges can. So again, welcome to IBEC. We're thrilled to have you, and please begin when you're ready.
So first, I want to thank you so much, the board of the Credit Acceptance Corporation. We are very glad to be here with you this afternoon, almost evening, although it's very sunny outside still here in Massachusetts. And we appreciate very much you taking this time and the interest on hearing about some of the challenges of CAC that we are facing today. So talking a little bit about who we are, just like a small introduction, we are the Eisenberg Graduate Consulting, and we also call ourselves the Purple Team. You see, there's a lot of purple here. We love this color. And I am Bruna Passos Amaral. I'm from Brazil. We have Kavya Patiban that is from India, and Jonathan, who is our colleague from California. So who is the Credit Acceptance Corporation? The Credit Acceptance Corporation is an American corporation that started in Michigan that has been around since the 70s, since 1972. And they help consumers, you help consumers with low access to credit. So people with poor to very poor credit scores have the opportunity of taking loans to buy cars from CAC. This is a publicly traded corporation, and it trades as CACC. You have to consider here that this company offers this great opportunity to people to rebuild their credits. Because when you take a loan, when you have a bad credit score and you take a loan, if you pay your loan on time, this is going to be a great opportunity for you to start rebuilding your score and rebuilding the trust of the market in you as a consumer, and will open you many other opportunities. So it is a great opportunity for people here to take this kind of loans, and it is a necessity also. Before talking a little bit more of the ethics and everything, we would like to talk to you a little bit more about the history of the subprime lending market. This is a market that started in the 70s, and like I said before, it started to help people with a poor credit so that they could have lendings and afford other things that other people had. In the 80s, the subprime market lending gained a lot of popularity. So it increased, the market increased, and people started getting more of those type of loans. In the 90s, it expanded in the sense that many more borrowers joined the market. So more players were in the market. And in the 2000s, there was an overextension of this type of market, with more and more people taking loans, and a lot of people taking loans that they were not 100% sure that they could repay. So yeah, there was a problem that led to 2008, where the subprime crisis was a global problem. There was a huge global crash in 2008 in the subprime market. And where are we now from 2008 to now? Well, now we face this moment when we are we're getting more and more people calling for more consumer protection, and also the subprime market is reducing a little bit. So this is a little bit of where we are now. And then I wanted to just talk a little bit about a few of the numbers of our industry. This is a $210 billion per year industry. So this is huge business. And subprime lending represents 13.8% of the whole lending market in the United States. So it's not a small portion. And it's important to understand that this is a market that caters to people with credit scores that go from 580 to 619. So poor credit scores, not the best payers in the market. So, and what are the interest rates that those people face? They face interest rates that go between 15 and 20 to 21%, and they also pay high fees because they are risky borrowers. Another important, a few important other numbers of the industry are, if you if you're a prime borrower, your interest will probably be something between 6 to 10%. If you're a subprime borrower, your interest will be something between 15 and 20%. So there is a huge difference here that we want to highlight, because those are risky borrowers. So the company who's doing it, in this case CAC, you have to have some assurance. You have to get something out of this business, is sure. However, we feel like it's also important to highlight here that someone that gets a loan in a subprime at a subprime rate, they in the end will pay something of 20 to 43% more than a person with a prime loan, with a prime score that would take a loan. And I know when you think about cars, a lot of people may say, well, but cars are a luxury. For someone like me from Brazil, where you can get around on buses, if you're from a big city, I would say a car is a luxury. But the moment I moved to this country, that I moved to the United States, I started understanding that here, a car is not a luxury. A car is a necessity, because most rural or smaller cities are built in a way that if you don't have a car, it's really hard to get around. So we wanted to show you a little bit who is the customer of CAC? Who are we working with? And we wanted to present to you Lauren. Lauren is a 24-year-old woman. She's from a rural area here in Western Massachusetts. She's a mother of 2 kids, 6-year-old Aaron and 3-year-old Luna. And she went to college for 2 years, but she was not able to finish because of the having kids and having to work and not being able to afford her student loans. And she has a credit score of 590, which is a low credit score. But how does this impact Luna? Because what happens, how does this impact Lauren if she doesn't have a car? If she doesn't have a car, that means that she cannot drive to work, because Lauren has to have at least 2 jobs to be able to pay for rent, pay for utilities, pay for food. So a car for her, it's not a luxury, it's a necessity. And she also has to drive kids to school. She wants to participate in their lives. She wants to be present at parent and teacher conferences. So if she doesn't have a car, if she cannot afford a car, she will be out of the market. How will she drive to her job that has very odd times and very odd hours with her shifts that she knows that she's going to take a few days before she has to work? So we're talking here about necessity. So it's really important also to talk about what are the questions that we are seeking to answer here. We want to talk about the ethics of this market. What are the ethics considerations for CAC? How can we help you guide this business towards a more ethical path? And how does the repossession of cars would impact CAC? And what is the outlook in the market? What are the market challenges? And can we maybe turn a potential weakness into a strength? And in terms of regulatory challenges, what challenges are we facing? Can we get ahead of those challenges? Because who will lend to people like Lauren if CAC does not do it?
I muted myself, so I'm not surprised that you couldn't hear me. But we're here to we want to make sure that we all understand some of the challenges we're facing. We believe that CAC is facing a fairly substantial and also seems to be potential danger to the business. Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York, is a fierce prosecutor. And, I'm glad that we have a good law firm on retainer. But, I think that the challenges are worrisome. So, what are we looking at? We're looking at an allegation from New York State that's now become federal. with the CFPB on it, talking about predatory lending practices, allegedly. And then, of course, that, allegedly that loan terms were misstated, that there were hidden charges for using a credit card versus a debit card. And this led to credit score damage. And that additionally, the APRs were not quite listed correctly, that there were earlier model rates that were not actually that were shown to consumers as if that was the rate that they had when they ended up being offered, the loan they're offered actually was at a much higher rate. So this, of course, led to really high repossession rates. And, there's an allegation that CAC may have pushed for a profit-sharing scheme with dealerships. And while we don't think that the dealerships should not be part of our work moving forward, we are concerned about the long-term sustainability of that, pushing people into cars they can't afford. But of course, that also meant that people were getting, expensive upgrades to cars that really didn't need them. And then this leads us to probably some of the most pernicious of these, being potential security fraud around people being offered higher loans, qualifying for a lower loan, and then rolling in upgrades to make it look like they qualified for a much higher loan than the car they were buying originally. And that could be an issue moving forward. Of course, also, we're thinking about like the big kind of market question of like, when's the shoe going to drop? When are we going to have a recession? And we also are concerned that we could end up in a place where, the CAC has commoditized this debt into bonds. And 7 million
I have a
Americans,
panel going. I'll call you
7
back.
million Americans are 90 or more
Okay.
delinquent on their auto loans. So of course, this could result in a crescendo of auto defaults coming this summer. That's why we think talking about this now and getting ourselves prepared could lead to a more sustainable future. It's really part of a larger auto repossession wave hitting the United States for both subprime and prime, auto loans. And a part of what's driving this is that car prices are falling. We can see that in 2021, we had this huge peak right around, the supply chain problems. And currently we've seen about a reduction of about 40% or so from the peaks. And we expect that's going to fall up to about 50% from the all-time highs, if not a little bit more. And of course, this is driving delinquency rates. We can see this shooting up right at the end of last year for the last time we measured this data. But we'd like to point out that we are currently higher in terms of delinquency rates than the Great Recession of 2008 and 9. And so we're looking at 6.5% delinquency, of delinquency rates, which I think portends a larger wave of repossessions. So what are the ethical considerations here? We've used the Langendorfer-Rockness model to assess CAC, and we're looking at, subprime loans are a necessity, but they are by their nature ethically fraught. CAC is lending to consumers who are of more risk, and there are fees attached to this, and you're dealing with some of the most untrustworthy borrowers in the market, the people that we don't know if they'll pay you back or not. And so, of course, there has to be a higher interest rate, and of course, there have to be higher fees. But in this country, cars represent jobs, they represent community involvement, and they're an expensive necessity. So, ethically, we do believe that we have to acknowledge that there is a tension here where a CAC is actually charging more to the consumers who can least afford it. And we're not saying that you should try to start, talking about everything you're going to reform or work on it, but we want to leave you with the idea that, ethical banks really shouldn't and probably, really be talking about it. This should be something that is done because it's the right thing to do, showing, not telling. So currently, we want to go through some of the current industry norms and values. It's to treat borrowers fairly. The loans, they've got to be repayable. You need to act in the benefit of the shareholders. You need to educate your borrowers. And you also need to take confidentiality seriously. We believe that those are echoed by the PRIDE acronym that you guys use with your employees, which is to have a positive attitude, that you need respectful communication, you need to be an insightful worker, you need direct communication, and of course, to be earnest. You want to be an earnest employee who comes at things really with the best interests of people at heart. So we have a few paths forward that we'd like to float with you. So one of those, you can, if you continue, should you continue doing these lending practices that have gotten you some trouble? If yes, okay, you can look at those fines as a cost of doing business. But I think that given that Letitia James is a tough cookie, that you might find that you're either facing further regulation or potentially a shutdown, like happened to Mercury Car Insurance a few years ago in California in the 2000s. There could be some hard times coming should you keep going down that path. We'd like to steer you down the no. What can you do to reform? So one of the things is, if you choose no, well, you could, with all of the financial problems coming, you could just repossess the car, take the loss, part of doing business. You could also look at exiting the market, refocus on another part. Finally, the one that we think is the correct ethical path forward, help borrowers to keep their vehicles and also stay in the market. So we'd also like to warn you that with this coming economic crisis, CAC caters to a niche market and a market that doesn't have very many champions. So what happens if the market crashes? Will SVB level funding be available? We don't think so. We think that, unfortunately, there might be some cold hearts and closed doors, in Washington. Just thinking about this, in 2008 and 9, you had $6 trillion roughly coming in, in total bailout funds. 578 went to the lending market for toxic assets. And that really only represented about 7% of the money dispersed. We don't think that will largely be available, if at all, maybe some of it. But we do believe that it's something that CAC should be preparing for moving forward, keeping an eye on this, working with creditors, getting things set up and ready to go for what comes next. So after that, we have a few recommendations of how to reform.
Okay, so now that we've kind of heard about the considerations of the case and learned more about the current state in the industry, what is it that we can do to better the situation? As a company, we have echoed what you guys already know. We know that this is an ethically fraught industry, and we know that we have to recognize the risk, but how do we aid our community and still make a profit? What we want to do is reimagine the lending practices. We don't want to keep that little asterisk on top of our rates and force our customers like Lauren to squint and read that small text. We want to list all of our lending fees up front, clearly state the APRs for the loans, and ensure that our customers are matched with vehicles that they can afford. We're going to make sure that our employees are not upselling. We're not going to have incentives and commissions for selling that bigger, better car. Instead, keep our customers as our main focal point and match them with what they need. We want to explore all the possibilities of rate reductions, right? As a business, we want to aid to our customer. And how we plan on doing that is through training. We need to bolster the ideology of making ethical considerations that are sustainable. And how are we going to do this? We're going to follow it with training. Your employees should be a reflection of the company's vision. They should walk the talk. CAC was found to give affordable car loans to those who are the least of us. Why are our employees not doing the same? Now, we estimate that ethical training internally can be done for $430 per person, which can then be further lowered if we're partnering with an educational institution. And now when you compare this, right, to the cost of keeping Lauren in her car, this is minuscule. Now, we don't want you to just focus on internal training and focus on bettering your employees, but we wanted to push and invest in also external education. Foster relationships with organizations such as the National Endowment for Financial Education. We're sure that those relationships are not going to go to waste. Now, we've seen all these news articles being plastered all over the news agencies. Fortune said that their subprime auto loan lenders found more Americans fall behind on car payments. There has been a significant rise in the number of Americans who have abandoned their cars just because the value of their loans are greater than the metal that they drive around. And this is not where we want our community to go. So how are we going to overcome this crisis? Right? We want to help prevent the loss on repost vehicles. Now, there is a huge disparity between those who can afford to being a first-time buyer, whereas those who are going forward for those secondhand cars. We want to keep all of our consumers in their vehicles. We don't want to see just, piles of cars and metals lying around. We want to contact these delinquent consumers as soon as we find that they are trailing behind. And what are we going to do with that communication? We want to explore alternative payments. How do we ensure that we are able to stay afloat as a business, but also not just benefit from those consumers? And why should this be done? We want to be financially stable, not just for our stakeholders, but also for our consumers. We want to stay ahead of the regulatory curve. We want to be ethical to our consumers and be a leader in the industry. We believe that communicating, not only in terms of rates, but also having these community interactions will foster a relationship with our consumers so they are aware of how they can be financially more stable and ensure that we have a relationship before they come to us as a potential customer. And we believe that we need to prepare for the future. We want to reform the business and communicate to become a market leader. We want to differentiate you in the industry so that you are ethically sound. And bringing it back to our model customer, Lauren, we want to help her stay in her car and lower the burden on her family. Even if we reduce the cost by a mere $100, that means a better livelihood, not just for her, but also for her children. That means that extra sports program after class, or the new pair of Nike trainers that her son wants to go to track. This doesn't cause a huge impact on the company, but it aids in the betterment of your customers, which is the moral thing to do. So thank you for your time, and we're happy to field any questions.
Okay, thank you. I will start out our Q&A session. You're really asking us to change the entire industry. And my question, if we are the leaders, the first ones out the door to change some of these practices, short term, are we going to be at any disadvantage to our competitors? Hopefully, if the industry turns around, we'll have more of a level playing field. But are we taking any risks that our competition is not taking, and will that have any effect on us short term?
Yes, you are. Absolutely. I think you are in the short term taking on some risks, working out lowering the amount of money coming in a month. I think looking at rate reductions, looking at possible, are there ways to lower principal, or is there a way to spread out make the term of the loan longer? That will lower the amount of money coming in. So, yes, absolutely. And also, we think that actually, if you do that in combination with a strong communications program, it becomes a way to differentiate yourself. Right now, they don't, a customer comes in desperate for a car. The dealership lays out the people that they want to, the different financing models available, and they pick one, probably based on rate. So, but what if we could make up for some of the lowered monthly payments in terms of a slight reduction in rate? Maybe look a little bit more attractive than your competitors, especially with the strong relationship that CAC has with dealerships. We think that could more than make up for it. But there, of course, always is some kind of risk, especially in the very short term. But we believe in the medium term that it actually ends up being a strength for you.
And I think to add on to what Jonathan was saying, CAC came on in 1970s, and they were one of the industry pioneers in subprime auto loans. You guys did make a risk when you came in offering these loans. So I think this is just going to, again, echo what the company has always stood for being a pioneer and trying things new. And if the company has been able to sustain itself for 50 years by being a pioneer then we know that you have the resources now to take the industry into a new direction.
Thank you. Colleagues on the board? Samantha, looks like you're ready.
Yes, I do have a question. I agree with what my board member Jim said about reshaping the industry. And as a corporation, we also have an ethical obligation to return to our shareholders. Has your consulting firm thought of any ways to potentially replace the income stream that we are going to be losing with the proposed changes you are suggesting?
Yes. We actually think that volume is the answer here. If you're looking at smaller margins, I mean, we're really talking about the loans are still about the same margins. We're talking about in the short term to try to get ahead of some of the regulatory challenges coming, reduce those rates, work at things like make sure that, is there a way to bring it more in line with what was expected? We think that actually also is a money saver because a financial penalty from New York State could be significant. The whole market in New York State is like $680 million. So it's not like one you can run away from. And, there's a long tail for loans, really. There's like 30 months at least. So we'd like to see you really see that as a way to like up volume to make up for some of the short-term costs. Because we really, of course, don't want to look at a reduction in, in the amount of money coming in. But a write-down of repossessing a bunch of cars, that's going to hit your books even more.
Yeah, we believe that this is a way of lowering the delinquency rate. Of course, it's going to be a little bit less money than expected, but it's better than a huge wave of default that might come if we don't do this.
Caroline. Do you want to unmute yourself, Caroline? You're talking without unmuting yourself.
I'd like you to, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. In part, I know your industry. You are talking about your industry, which does not have, frankly, a positive concept. However, you're not talking about your customer. You're talking about how you can improve so that your customer will buy. I disagree with that. I feel it, and see what you think. You need to train your customer. You need to investigate your customer. You need to help your customer balance his or her books. You need to look into the situation. You just don't take a customer. My husband was in the automobile business. He would ask you, what do you want? Why? For whom it is? And he would disagree and tell you, I do not recommend that. And if the price were not possible, he would not sell it to you. So part of it is training your customer with ethics and with understanding. And unfortunately, this industry has a major problem. And as I hear it, you are discussing your industry, but not your customers' awareness of what is going on.
Caroline, what is your question for the team?
Why aren't you talking about your customer?
Thank you.
No, but Caroline, thank you for that question. And I think maybe the message wasn't exactly translated when we were going through our presentation. But the whole concept of us wanting to be, a differentiated competitor in the industry was focusing on our communications aspect. And I think I briefly touched upon it, that we don't only want to internally train and educate our employees, but also have that external training. And what we meant by having external training was to working more in terms of community outreach, talking to these customers who have a low credit score and give them more education or resources for them to improve their credit score and potentially move out of these subprime auto loans. We don't want to think of them as customers or as, tag them as a customer ID with a rate, but see them as individuals, see them as families, see how the cost of their auto loan is affecting their livelihood. And I think that's why we wanted to show you how a customer that we had picked and kind of showcase that their story could change if CAC was going to come up with this. And yes, we strongly agree with what you said, that community outreach should be one of the forefronts in the motives going forward.
Why don't you go to organizations like the YWCA and nonprofit and start public relations in an ethical way for your industry? Your
Right. Sorry. Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go right ahead.
Oh, that's actually something that we wrote about in one of our advisory papers on this, is like working with churches, working with community organizations, working with kind of touchstones in the local community, because we also think that like there's an image problem here, and communications. Like this is an opportunity to kind of position CAC as an ethical leader. And so we think that if we can really actually walk that talk, it turns it into a real strength and turns something that was a real weakness into something that actually differentiates this loan and makes something different moving forward. Because yeah, it's about communities, but it's also about like, how do we access those communities? So working with church groups, working with the local like Boys and Girls Club, working with another partner like the National Endowment, like working with someone else like the National Endowment for Financial Education, we actually think would be the way to go. Something like that, where we're accessing resources that otherwise we would have to develop ourselves, which I don't think is financially feasible. But sorry to cut you off. I did not mean to do that.
No, sir, it's quite all right. The only thing that I say is the industry itself has a negative reputation. So that's the first place you have to handle. And in that, you take positive organizations, houses of worship, YWCA, whatever, and you start presenting courses for free to people who are involved. And you may have a list, even from the Department of State, of the states, of people who have had to forfeit their cars or have had problems with their income tax. But you need to go into all of these areas and not just worry. I know you need to be concerned how you're going to bring in money, but unfortunately, as I see it in management and organization, money is secondary to ethics and integrity.
Thank you both of you. Mike?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I echo the sentiments that have already been said, and I have a couple of thoughts. And talking about the training that Caroline just brought up, when you were mentioning the way this works, it seems like the buyer would go into a dealership, and this is how it's worked with me. You go into a dealership, you find the car you want, and they send you to the finance department, and you pick the loan. So the question I have is, it doesn't seem like our employees are the ones that need the training, or perhaps part of the training needs to happen at the dealership. Can you address that?
Yeah, for sure. What we meant by training our employees is training anyone that could be a reflection of the CAC brand. When we do put our loans available at such dealerships, we do send out training for the employees at the dealerships and how they should talk and translate what we represent and what our company's vision is. So even though they might not be on CAC's payroll, I think anyone that is a reflection of the brand needs to be, bought in and tied into where the company is heading.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense to me. And then the other area, I think I'm getting back to what Samantha was talking about earlier, and it kind of gets to the economic feasibility of this. And for example, if we're going to make 100,000 loans, we know that, just pick a number, 15,000 are going to default. And that's how we set our interest rates, because we have to pay a return to our investors and this sort of thing. So if we're going to lower the rates, It seems like, that was a suggestion you had. I think Jonathan mentioned that. If we're going to lower the rates and have more loans, of course that's possible, but then you're going to definitionally have more delinquencies just because it's kind of a numbers game, right? So I'm wondering if you've considered how we might structure it. If there's a structure that somehow we could add maybe another layer to the actuarial analysis that we're doing. Perhaps when you grant the loan, it's at 20%, and if you pay the first year, it goes to 19%. I'm wondering if you considered any other models for us.
Yeah, a model, other countries do different models like that for when you're evaluating if a customer paid for a year or two, and then the interest rate is lowering. This would be a great model to do that. And I think this also goes hand in hand with the whole financial literacy project that should be linked with everything we're doing, because it's not only lowering interest rates, just, telling everyone, hi, we're here and we're lowering your interest rates and you can borrow this car in default. No, it's just like telling people how important it is to build a credit score, to have a good credit score, and to be considered as a good payer from the market, so that you can have access to so many other things. And this is going to be good for you, for your community, for your family. So not only, going back to your question, not only thinking about another actuarial model in which if people paid for a certain amount of time, we're going to go and diminish those rates at a certain rate that will be comfortable for the company, but will also be beneficial for the customer, but also that all of those things go hand in hand with trainings and financial literacy from CAC side and the customer side.
Thank you.
And well, there's one more point I'd love to add on to that, is like, to get ahead of the regulatory hammer that's hanging above your head, go back and look at those loans that are in question and part of the suit. See if there's a way to just move the interest rate either immediately or over a certain amount of time to be in line with what the customer was supposed to be paying or thought they would be paying. It's a way to show good faith, especially in light of, a potential a large case coming against the company. So that would be another place to explore a model of, getting ahead of that challenge.
Thank you, Samantha.
Yes, I have a question just to clarify what has been said, branching off of Mike's question. You mentioned that other countries have models. Am I correct to assume that what makes your model different is the opportunity of offering internal and external training to different employees?
This is one of the things, but also the lowering interest rates for people that have been good payers. This is something that banks do in countries like Brazil. I myself had a loan like that. It was like a 30-year loan for buying a house, and then year after year, my interests were reduced because I was a good payer. I was a good customer. So this is done different in other places. And I think this could be really beneficial for this type of customer and also for the company, because it's better to have a little bit less of gain, but less people defaulting than more people just abandoning cars because they're paying way more than the cars it's worth.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anyone else amongst the judges have some questions for our consultants? Do we have all our questions answered? Samantha, anything more? Mike, Caroline?
I just worry, I'm sorry. I just worry about the concept of competition. And on that basis, fine, it's business, but I compare it to Boeing and the two crashes that happened when Muhlenberg, the president, said, oh, we want to get our planes out of the hangar before Airbus. Okay, I've been in business. I find money very complicated, so I don't like to deal with it. Therefore, I'm not worried about competition. I'm worried about my ethics and integrity, and Muhlenberg did not.
Just to address that very quickly, I think that is exactly why we think that this is the correct choice, because right now there is no differentiation really within the market. If you can get on your consumer's mind, your potential borrowers ahead of time, also doing so in an ethical way, you're making sure that they buy a car that they're actually worth. But also that circumvents a potential securities issue where someone's issued a loan that is way more than they can pay, but it looks like to the market that they're credit worthy. So like they're credit worthy for more of a car than they really can afford. So I think it's like, to bring it back to the idea of what you said about your father, or your husband, excuse me, your husband working in the auto market, like making sure you pair the customer up with something they can afford, that helps everything and keeps people in a car, keeps people moving. And we just have to think like the potential of repossessing a whole wave of cars is far more disastrous than any other financial likelihood here. We're talking about small reductions in revenue relative to having to write down the value at least by half, if not more, of the current values of loans if they are repossessed. So, we strongly encourage kind of a more customer-minded mindset moving forward.
Thank you. I think we've had our questions answered. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take off our board of directors hats, and you can take off your consultant hats. And we'd like to give you some feedback on your presentation, on the content of it, the delivery of it, et cetera, et cetera. And as I said before, if you choose to use any of this information for your 10-minute or your 90-second presentation, if it's helpful to you, you're certainly welcome to do that as well. Let's start the feedback. Who would like to start that? Samantha, Mike, Caroline, who'd like to start?
Yes, I can start. Oops, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Congratulations. I think you guys did great. This is by far my personal favorite presentation that I've seen come through. You guys had fantastic speaking voices. It was very clear and concise, and I felt like the flow was very, very good. I felt like the pacing was nice. Some feedback I do have, though, just because I am very familiar with this industry, I would have appreciated more hits on losses versus losses. You mentioned regulatory things coming in that could potentially shut down our business, but how much do we face in losses? And is that going to be less than what we face if we were to follow your proposal and potentially lose money on these more ethical solutions? I feel like it would make a lot of an impact for a board of directors to see that, sure, we could be losing, but the risk of us being shut out of the market entirely is much higher. And then Caroline hit you with some very, very hard ethical scenarios. I want to congratulate you again for sticking to your guns there. And I also like your flexibility in mentioning volumes. I feel like there should be an emphasis on how the marketing of this might bring in more income, because as Mike pointed out also, there was really no mention of how we would be supplementing an income stream or a potential income stream with the potential losses we have set up for us. So those are just the big things that I noticed. Other than that, fantastic job, guys. It was awesome.
Thank
It
you.
was very professional and direct. And I like the fact that for what you did, you knew what you were talking about. I just suggest there are loose ends that are always very part of my concern.
Thank you. Mike?
Yeah, I think I echo those comments. I thought it was a very good presentation. We all kind of understand it going in. There is this reputational issue that industry is kind of dealing with, and you address that head on, which I thought was good. To skirt around it certainly wouldn't have gotten to the point of the ethical dilemma that we're facing. I thought there was a little too much time on Lauren. I think we all understand that there are people behind all these loans. I think that could have been a little shorter. Obviously in the 90-second one, you're not going to have time to develop her as much, but that was something that I thought we probably could have gotten into the issue a little quicker on that. I also would echo Samantha's comment that I thought your presentation skills were quite good. that we could understand you. You were speaking to us, and I appreciated that. And you communicated, I thought, with us very well because of your presentation skills. So I thought it was a great job. Thank you.
Great, great. A couple things from me. I love what you put in your title. Translate an ethical deficit into a market differentiator. That's a great line. Very, very well done on that, because that's really what business ethics is. In a way, it's what it's all about, because you can use business ethics for a positive. It's not meant to be penalizing. It's not meant to be just a cost center. And I think that you understand that just by judging by your presentation. This is not something that is bad. This is something that is really good in a lot of ways. I really enjoyed your enthusiasm that you played with, because you made me want to listen to you. Now, I actually teach presentation skills. I don't tell people that ahead of time. I don't want to freak them out. But what I always say is, no one's ever going to be more interested in your topic than you appear to be. And you appeared to be interested in your own topic. And because of that, your audience, and certainly myself, became very interested in what you had to say as well. So always keep that in mind going forward. Enthusiasm will take you a very, very long way. And yeah, I think that you I think that you covered a lot of things really well. I do agree with my judging colleagues here on some of the things that they suggested might be additions or changes or whatever going forward. But I think given the information that you worked with, I do think that you hit a lot of really good points. And I think that the research that you did backed that up really well. Caroline, Caroline?
Okay, thank you. No, I want to say you also took a topic in one way or another we are familiar. So as we started younger and bought cars and went to dealers, and so I went once to a dealer. Oh, is your husband with you? I said, no, I didn't have a husband then. But I didn't say. He said, well, then come back with your husband. I mean, so I didn't come back. But I met my husband because I was a complaining customer.
Oh,
Oh.
that makes for a great story right there. A complaint leads to marriage. Nice.
I could tell you more.
And I kind of want to know. Now, team, you've heard some feedback from us, and you've answered our questions, etc. Do you have any questions at all for your judging team? Anything that we can help you with further? Anything to do with your 10-minute or your 90-second, or just anything about your lives? Can we answer any questions for you?
I think you're in pretty good shape. I really appreciate the feedback. I think that is loss versus loss is a great point. And something we actually have data on too. So it's like, I think presenting some of that is definitely something we're going to try to look at moving forward. You know, and how that fits in with our ethical considerations for our 10-minute, excuse me.
10 minutes.
10 seconds. Oh my goodness.
Wouldn't that be interesting? Okay.
Get 9 words. Go.
Yeah. Bruna, Kavya, do you have any questions for us, or are you feeling confident about tomorrow?
No, I really appreciate the feedback that we got from our judges. And I think looking at it from a marketing standpoint on how we can aid kind of with the different income streams and, you know, market not only externally, but also internally to the stakeholders is a very interesting viewpoint that we should incorporate going forward.
I think you brought up some ideas that your industry would really benefit hearing more about. It is an industry that has made money despite itself, so to speak, that through unethical practices has made tons and tons of money. And so that's a tough topic to address, because it's not as though that they're in any way failing from a financial standpoint. You have to convince them that they want to be good companies, and that good things will come their way as a result of being good companies. And that's a tough nut to crack. And I think that you did a really nice job with that.